A wolf crashes a funeral and climbs onto the coffin of a young boy. Everyone freezes, unable to comprehend what it means. But what happened next left the entire room speechless. The dense canopy of the Adirondack Mountains cast dancing shadows across Ethan Carter's face as he navigated through the familiar trails of Evergreen's wilderness. At 17, he moved through the forest with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime among the ancient trees. The spring air carried the sweet scent of pine needles and fresh earth, a perfume more precious to him than any artificial fragrance. Ethan paused, his keen eyes catching movement in the undergrowth. Years of forest exploration had taught him to read the subtle signs of wildlife, but something felt different today. The usual chorus of birdsong had fallen silent, replaced by an expectant hush that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from. Stay tuned. Following his instincts, he ventured off the main trail, careful to mark his path with subtle signs that only he would recognize. The forest floor was soft beneath his boots, still damp from the morning dew. As he pushed deeper into the wilderness, the modern world seemed to fall away, replaced by an older, more primal reality. A faint whimper caught his attention. Ethan froze, listening intently. The sound came again, barely audible, but unmistakably one of distress. He moved forward cautiously, pushing aside a thorny bramble to reveal a clearing. What he found there would change his life forever. A wolf pup, no more than a few months old, lay trapped in an illegal snare. Its dark fur was matted with mud, and its golden eyes locked onto Ethan with a mixture of fear and defiance. The trap was crude but effective, designed to catch anything unfortunate enough to stumble into its grasp. Without hesitation, Ethan reached for his backpack, pulling out the multi-tool he always carried. "Easy there, little one," he whispered, his voice gentle and steady. "I'm going to help you." The pup watched him intently, its initial growls subsiding into worried whimpers. Working carefully, Ethan managed to release the mechanism. The moment it was free, he expected the pup to bolt, but instead it remained still, studying him with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something profound passed between them, a connection that transcended the natural barriers between wild and tame. "I'll call you Shadow," Ethan said softly, noting the pup's midnight black fur. To his surprise, the wolf's tail gave a slight wag at the sound of its new name. After a few moments, Shadow limped a few steps away, then turned to look back at Ethan before disappearing into the underbrush. That evening, as Ethan recounted the story to his mother, Megan, over dinner, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just chance. Megan, a respected environmental biologist, listened with both professional and maternal interest. "Wolves haven't been common in these parts for decades," she mused, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "If there's a pack nearby, we need to document this. It could be crucial for local conservation efforts." Ethan nodded, but kept to himself the strange sensation he'd felt during his encounter with Shadow. It was as if the forest itself had orchestrated their meeting, setting in motion events that would ripple through their small community. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself drawn back to the clearing where he'd first met Shadow. Sometimes he caught glimpses of the wolf pup watching him from afar, each sighting confirming that their connection was growing stronger. What began as curiosity evolved into something deeper, a bond that seemed to defy natural laws. But as spring progressed, Ethan began experiencing strange symptoms he couldn't explain. Occasional dizzy spells and moments of extreme fatigue would wash over him without warning. He kept these episodes secret, not wanting to worry his mother or interrupt his forest excursions. Something inside told him that his connection to the forest and to Shadow was more important than his mysterious ailment. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating through Evergreen about livestock disturbances on the outskirts of town. While no animals had been harmed, the mere suggestion of wolves in the area was enough to stir up ancient fears among the townspeople. Ethan listened to these discussions with growing concern, knowing that Shadow's safety might soon be at risk. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in deep purples and blues, Ethan sat on a fallen log in his favorite clearing. The sound of approaching footsteps made him turn, expecting to see a deer or perhaps Shadow. Instead, he found himself face to face with Claire Henderson, a new student at his school who had recently moved to Evergreen from New York City. "So this is where you disappear to every day," she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "The whole school thinks you're some kind of mysterious hermit." Ethan felt his cheeks flush, suddenly aware of how odd his daily forest retreats must seem to outsiders. But before he could respond, a familiar black shape emerged from the shadows, causing Claire to gasp in surprise. Claire stood frozen, her eyes wide as Shadow emerged from the underbrush. The wolf pup, now noticeably larger than when Ethan first found him, moved with silent grace. To Ethan's surprise, Shadow showed no signs of aggression towards Claire. Instead, he seemed curious, his golden eyes studying her with the same intelligence that had captivated Ethan weeks ago. "Don't move," Ethan whispered, though he sensed no danger in the situation. "He's friendly, but he's still wild." You know this wolf." Claire's voice trembled slightly, but Ethan noticed she was making a conscious effort to stay calm. Her reaction wasn't one of panic, but of wonder, something he hadn't expected from someone who'd spent their entire life in the concrete jungle of New York City. Shadow took a few steps closer, his nose twitching as he caught Claire's scent. "I found him trapped a few weeks ago," Ethan explained softly. "Since then he's been, well, following me, I guess." "I named him Shadow." Claire slowly sank to her knees, maintaining eye contact with the wolf pup. "He's beautiful," she breathed. "I've never seen anything like this. In the city, the wildest thing we had was pigeons fighting over hot dog buns." Her comment made Ethan laugh, breaking the tension. Shadow's ears perked up at the sound, and to everyone's surprise, he moved closer to Claire, allowing her to carefully extend her hand. The wolf pup sniffed her fingers before giving them a gentle lick. "I think he likes you," Ethan said, amazed at Shadow's behavior. In all their encounters, he'd never seen the wolf act so comfortable with anyone else. "But you haven't answered my question. How did you find this place?" Claire's cheeks reddened slightly. "I followed you," she admitted. "I've seen you heading into the forest after school every day, and I was curious. Everyone in town talks about you, you know. The forest boy who speaks to animals. They talk about me." Ethan felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, another episode of the mysterious fatigue that had been plaguing him. He gripped the fallen log to steady himself, hoping Claire wouldn't notice. But she did. "Are you okay?" She moved to help him, causing Shadow to retreat a few steps, watching intently. "You looked pale for a moment there." "I'm fine," Ethan insisted, though the world was still spinning slightly. "Just tired. So I've been having these spells lately, but it's nothing serious." Claire frowned, unconvinced. "How long has this been happening?" "A few weeks," Ethan admitted. "Around the time I found Shadow, actually." He hadn't made that connection before, and something about saying it out loud made him pause. Could there be a relationship between his mysterious symptoms and his encounters with the wolf? Before he could pursue that thought, voices echoed through the trees, distant but approaching. Shadow's ears flattened against his head, and without a sound he melted back into the forest. Claire and Ethan exchanged worried glances. "Probably the Henderson property over there," a gruff voice called out. "That's where most of the tracks have been found." "Hunters," Ethan whispered, his heart racing. "They shouldn't be here. This is protected land." He turned to Claire. "We need to go now." They moved quickly but quietly through the forest, Ethan leading them along a path that would avoid the approaching voices. As they walked, Claire spoke in hushed tones. "Those tracks they mentioned, they're talking about the livestock disturbances, aren't they? The ones everyone in town is worried about." Ethan nodded grimly. "They think wolves are responsible, but there hasn't been any actual damage, just tracks and sightings. Some people are using it as an excuse to push for hunting permits, even though it's illegal in this conservation area. Is that why you haven't told anyone about Shadow?" "Partly," Ethan replied, helping Claire over a fallen tree. "But it's more than that. There's something special about him, something I can't explain. It's like he's more than just a wolf." Claire was quiet for a moment, processing this. "I believe you," she finally said. "I felt it too when he looked at me. It was like he could see right through me, you know?" They reached the edge of the forest just as the sun was setting. The lights of Evergreen twinkled below them, the small town looking peaceful and ordinary from this distance. But Ethan knew that beneath that tranquil surface, tensions were brewing. "Meet me here tomorrow after school," Claire said suddenly. "I want to help. Maybe we can figure out what's really going on with the livestock disturbances and clear the wolves' names." Ethan hesitated. His connection with Shadow had been something private, special. But looking at Claire's determined expression, he realized that maybe he needed an ally in the human world as much as he needed his bond with the forest. "Okay," he agreed, "but we have to be careful. There's more at stake here than just Shadow." As if to emphasize his point, another wave of dizziness hit him. This time it was stronger, making him stumble. Claire caught his arm, steadying him, her face etched with concern. "That's it," she declared. "Tomorrow we're also going to talk about these spells of yours. There has to be an explanation." As they parted ways at the town's edge, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Claire's arrival in his life wasn't just coincidence. Like his meeting with Shadow, it felt like part of something larger, a pattern he couldn't quite see yet. In the gathering darkness, a pair of golden eyes watched them from the tree line. Shadow observed their departure before turning back to the forest depths, where others of his kind waited. The bond between wolf and boy was growing stronger, but so were the forces that threatened to tear their worlds apart. The next morning, Ethan woke to find his mother, Megan, already immersed in her research at the kitchen table. Papers and photographs were spread out before her, showing various animal tracks and ecological data. Her expression was troubled as she looked up at him. "The university called," she said, pushing her reading glasses up. "They're concerned about unusual wildlife patterns in the area. Several tracking devices have shown animals deviating from their normal routes, all converging in one section of the forest." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He knew exactly which section she meant. It was where he regularly met Shadow. Trying to keep his voice casual, he asked, "What kind of animals?" "Everything from deer to bears," Megan replied, showing him a map marked with intersecting lines. "It's as if something's drawing them there. In all my years studying wildlife behavior, I've never seen anything like it." Before Ethan could respond, another wave of dizziness washed over him, stronger than ever before. The kitchen tilted sideways, and he gripped the counter to stay upright. This time he couldn't hide it from his mother. "Ethan!" Megan was at his side instantly, her cool hand pressed against his forehead. "This is the third time this week we're going to Dr. Thompson today, no arguments." "Mom, I'm fine," he protested weakly, but even he knew it wasn't true. The episodes were becoming more frequent and intense. Still, something inside him resisted the idea of medical intervention, as if it might somehow break his connection to the forest, to Shadow. At school, Claire was waiting by his locker, her face lighting up when she saw him. However, her smile quickly faded as she noticed his pallor. "Another spell?" "This morning," he admitted, lowering his voice as other students passed by. "My mum's making me see Dr. Thompson after school." "Good," Claire said firmly, "because I did some research last night. Ethan, these symptoms of yours, they started exactly when you met Shadow, didn't they?" He nodded slowly, the correlation becoming harder to ignore. Claire glanced around before pulling out her tablet, showing him a web page about ancient Native American legends of the region. "Look at this," she whispered excitedly. The original inhabitants of this area believed in something called spirit bonds, connections between humans and animals that went beyond normal relationships. According to the legends, these bonds could physically affect both parties, especially during the initial connection period. Ethan stared at the screen, his mind racing. "You think that's what's happening to me and Shadow?" "I think it's worth considering," Claire replied. The legends also mention that the bonded animals would draw other wildlife to them, creating sacred gathering places in the forest. She paused meaningfully. "Sound familiar?" Before Ethan could respond, the hallway buzzed with excitement as Sarah Chen, head of the school newspaper, rushed past with her camera. "Did you guys hear?" she called out to everyone within earshot. "They found weird markings all over the Henderson farm this morning. Some people are saying it's proof of dangerous wildlife in the area." Claire and Ethan exchanged worried glances. The Henderson farm bordered the section of forest where Shadow lived. "We need to check it out," Claire whispered, "after your doctor's appointment." The rest of the school day passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. During lunch, Ethan noticed more students than usual watching him, whispering behind their hands. His reputation as the forest boy seemed to be growing, especially now that the town was buzzing with wildlife rumors. In his last class, Advanced Biology, Ethan found himself staring out the window at the distant tree line. For a moment, he thought he saw a dark shape moving among the trees, but another wave of dizziness made his vision swim. When the final bell rang, Claire was waiting for him outside. "I'm coming with you to the doctor," she announced. "Don't argue. You look like you're about to faint." Dr. Thompson's office was a small, comfortable space filled with outdated magazines and the faint smell of antiseptic. The elderly doctor had been treating Evergreen's residents for decades, and his kind eyes showed genuine concern as he examined Ethan. "Physically, there's nothing wrong with you," he concluded, frowning at his charts. "But these symptoms, fatigue, dizziness, occasional disorientation, they're real enough. When did they start?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Claire. She gave him an encouraging nod. "About 3 weeks ago," he said carefully. After I had a strange experience in the forest." Dr. Thompson leaned forward, his expression shifting subtly. "What kind of experience?" But before Ethan could answer, a commotion erupted outside the clinic. Through the window they could see people gathering, pointing toward the forest. Even from this distance, the unusual sight was clear. A large group of deer was emerging from the trees in broad daylight, moving with purpose toward the town. And at the edge of the forest, barely visible in the shadows, stood a black wolf pup watching. Dr. Thompson rushed to the window, his face pale. "In all my years," he muttered. Then he turned to Ethan, his eyes narrowing with sudden understanding. "Young man, I think it's time you told me exactly what happened in those woods." Dr. Thompson closed his office door and pulled down the window shades, creating a cocoon of privacy despite the growing commotion outside. His movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic, as he retrieved an old leather-bound book from a locked drawer in his desk. "I've been practicing medicine in Evergreen for over 40 years, he began, his weathered hands caressing the book's worn cover. "But there are some things in these mountains that science can't explain, things I've seen but never documented officially." He opened the book, revealing handwritten notes and sketches. Claire gasped as she recognized symbols similar to those she'd found in her research. Ethan leaned forward, his dizziness momentarily forgotten in his fascination. "Your grandmother was one of them, Ethan," Dr. Thompson said quietly. "One of the forest-touched. That's what the original inhabitants of this land called people who developed special connections with the wilderness." Ethan's mind reeled. "My grandmother? But Mom never mentioned—" "Megan doesn't know," the doctor interrupted. "Your grandmother made me promise to keep it secret until another forest-touched appeared in the family. She knew it would skip a generation. It always does." Outside, the crowd's murmurs grew louder as more wildlife emerged from the forest. Dr. Thompson ignored the commotion, focused entirely on Ethan. "Tell me about the wolf," he said. It wasn't a question. And so Ethan told him everything, finding Shadow, their growing connection, the strange symptoms that followed. As he spoke, Claire added what she'd discovered about the spirit bonds, and Dr. Thompson nodded with increasing excitement. "It's happening again," he whispered, flipping through his book. "Every 100 years or so, the forest chooses a guardian. The animals recognize this person, are drawn to them. But it comes with a price. The physical symptoms you're experiencing are your body adapting to the bond." "Adapting?" Claire asked, her voice filled with concern. "You mean these symptoms could be dangerous?" Dr. Thompson's expression grew serious. "The process is delicate. Historical records show that not all chosen guardians survived the transformation. The strain on the body can be extreme." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "What happens if I fail?" "The balance would be disrupted," the doctor replied gravely. "The unusual wildlife behavior we're seeing? It's just the beginning. Without a successful guardian to maintain harmony between the human and natural worlds, the conflict between civilization and wilderness could tear this region apart." A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. "Dr. Thompson," it was Sarah Chen's voice. "The mayor's called an emergency town meeting about the wildlife situation. They're requesting your presence as the town's senior medical authority." Dr. Thompson quickly locked away his book. "We'll continue this discussion later," he whispered. "For now, tell no one what you know. Ethan, you need to be careful. There are those who would misunderstand or fear what's happening to you. As they left the clinic, they found the streets of Evergreen in chaos. Wildlife sightings had been reported all over town: deer walking down Main Street, foxes appearing in backyards, birds gathering in unprecedented numbers, and everywhere, people were talking about the strange markings at the Henderson farm. "We need to see those markings," Claire said decisively. "If they're connected to what's happening to you." "Agreed," Ethan replied, even as another wave of dizziness hit him. This time, though, something was different. Instead of just vertigo, he experienced a flash of something else, a vision of the forest from above, as if he were seeing through the eyes of a soaring bird. Claire caught him as he stumbled. "What did you see?" she asked, somehow knowing this episode was different. I think I saw through their eyes," he whispered, amazed and terrified at the same time. "The animals, I could see what they see." Before Claire could respond, a familiar figure approached them, Ethan's mother, her face tight with worry. "Ethan, where have you been? The mayor's called a meeting, and as the town's environmental expert, I need you there. Something strange is happening, and I think it has to do with the forest." As they walked toward the town hall, Ethan felt Shadow's presence in his mind, a new awareness that both thrilled and frightened him. The wolf was trying to tell him something urgent, something about the gathering of animals and the ancient markings. The town hall was packed, the atmosphere tense with fear and speculation. As they found seats, Ethan noticed several hunters from the day before, their faces grim with purpose. Mayor Harrison stood at the podium, shuffling papers nervously. "Citizens of Evergreen," the mayor began, "we face an unprecedented situation. The unusual wildlife activity has many of us concerned for our safety. We've contacted state authorities about issuing emergency hunting permits." Ethan's heart raced. He knew he had to do something, but revealing his connection to the forest could put everything at risk. As the mayor continued speaking, Ethan felt another consciousness brush against his. Shadow was nearby, watching, waiting. In that moment, Ethan realized he had to make a choice: continue hiding his true nature and watch as fear drove the town to drastic measures, or step forward and embrace his role as guardian, whatever the consequences might be. The answer came not from his mind, but from deep within his soul, where the ancient whispers of the forest echoed with increasing urgency. The town hall buzzed with nervous energy as Mayor Harrison outlined plans for what he called wildlife control measures. Each word felt like a physical blow to Ethan, who could sense Shadow's growing unease through their strengthening bond. The wolf remained hidden in the tree line just beyond the building, watching, waiting. Megan Carter stood up, her voice clear and authoritative. "As the town's environmental expert, I must object to any hunting permits. These animals aren't showing aggressive behavior. They're displaying unprecedented patterns of coordinated movement. This is a unique opportunity for scientific study." "Patterns?" scoffed Richard Henderson, rising from his seat. "Those beasts are threatening our livelihood. Just this morning I found strange markings all over my farm. Native markings, according to some. This isn't natural. It's an invasion." The crowd murmured in agreement, fear feeding their reactions. Ethan felt another wave of dizziness approaching, but this time something was different. Instead of fighting it, he let it wash over him. Suddenly, his awareness expanded exponentially. He could sense every animal within a mile radius, feel their presence like points of light in his mind. Claire noticed his expression change. "Ethan," she whispered, concerned. "What's happening?" Before he could respond, Sarah Chen projected photographs of the Henderson farm markings onto the hall screen. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The symbols matched exactly the ones in Dr. Thompson's book, ancient patterns that spoke of the bond between guardians and the forest. Dr. Thompson, sitting quietly in the corner, caught Ethan's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. The time for hiding was over. Standing on shaky legs, Ethan made his way to the podium. The room fell silent, curious about what the forest boy might say. As he faced the crowd, he felt Shadow's consciousness merge more fully with his own, lending him strength and certainty. "Those markings," he began, his voice steadier than he expected. "They're not a warning, they're a message. The forest is trying to communicate with us." "Communicate?" Henderson laughed derisively. "Boy, have you lost your mind?" But Ethan continued, drawing on knowledge that seemed to flow directly from his connection with the wilderness. For centuries, these mountains have had guardians, people chosen by the forest to maintain balance between our world and the natural world. My grandmother was one of them. The crowd erupted in whispers. Megan stared at her son, her professional composure cracking as pieces of family history suddenly clicked into place. "Your grandmother's journals?" she whispered. "All those stories I thought were just fairy tales, they're real," Ethan affirmed, "and now the forest has chosen again." As if responding to his words, every bird in the vicinity began to sing in unison, creating an otherworldly chorus that silenced the crowd. Suddenly, the main doors of the town hall swung open. Shadow stood in the doorway, his presence commanding attention. But instead of panic, a strange calm settled over the room. The wolf's golden eyes met Ethan's, and in that moment, their bond manifested visibly, a subtle aurora of blue light connecting them. "This is what's been causing your symptoms," Claire realized aloud. The bond was growing stronger. Dr. Thompson stepped forward, his medical authority lending weight to the moment. "What you're witnessing is something our predecessors understood, but we've forgotten. The forest doesn't just exist alongside us. It communicates, it chooses, it protects. These animals aren't invading. They're gathering to acknowledge their new guardian." Mayor Harrison gripped the podium, visibly struggling with this revelation. "Even if what you're saying is true, how can we be sure this connection is safe for our town?" Ethan felt a sudden surge of energy through his bond with Shadow. Without conscious thought, he raised his hand and the light in the room shifted as a translucent image appeared above them, a three-dimensional map of the region showing the intricate web of wildlife movements over the past weeks. "The animals have been protecting us," Ethan explained, understanding flowing through him. "They've been creating a natural barrier against the environmental threats heading our way. The increased logging activity to the north, the polluted water sources from the new development project, they're trying to help us save ourselves." The image shifted, showing future projections of environmental damage that would occur without intervention. The crowd watched in stunned silence as they saw their beloved town's potential future, both the dark path of destruction and the promising route of harmony with nature. Megan stepped forward, tears in her eyes as she looked at her son with new understanding. "The research data supports this. All the unusual animal behavior has been directing us away from environmental hazards we hadn't even discovered yet." But as the truth began to sink in, Ethan felt another transformation beginning within him, more profound than any before. His consciousness expanded further, connecting not just with Shadow, but with the entire forest ecosystem. The sensation was overwhelming, and he knew that the real test of his role as guardian was just beginning. Claire caught him as he swayed, the weight of his awakening powers threatening to overwhelm him. "Something's happening," she whispered, noting how his eyes had begun to shine with an ethereal light. "Something bigger than any of us imagined." Shadow moved closer, pressing against Ethan's side as the transformation continued. The wolf's presence anchored him, but even Shadow seemed aware that their journey was entering a new, more challenging phase. The path of the Guardian was revealing itself, but with it came a responsibility that would test not only Ethan's strength, but the town's ability to embrace a future where human and nature existed in true harmony. The days following the town hall revelation transformed Evergreen in ways no one could have predicted. The morning after Ethan's public demonstration of his abilities, a line of curious townspeople stretched from his front door all the way to Main Street. Some came seeking guidance about the wildlife in their yards. Others wanted to share stories about his grandmother that had been dismissed as local folklore for decades. Ethan, still adjusting to his expanding consciousness, found himself overwhelmed by more than just the attention. Every morning brought new abilities, new connections to the natural world that he struggled to control. He could hear the whispers of trees, feel the pulse of underground streams, and sense the emotions of animals miles away. "You need to rest," Claire insisted, watching him sway as another wave of sensory input washed over him. They sat in his backyard, where Shadow had taken up permanent residence, much to the neighborhood's fascination. "Dr. Thompson said the transformation process could be dangerous if you push too hard." "I can't rest," Ethan replied, his voice strained. "Something's coming. I can feel it through the forest's awareness. It's like a storm gathering, but not in the sky. Megan appeared with a tray of herbal tea, her scientist's mind now working overtime to document every aspect of her son's transformation. She'd spent the past few days digitizing her mother's journals, finding detailed accounts of similar experiences. "Your grandmother wrote about this phase," she said, setting down the tray. She called it the awakening echo, when the Guardian's consciousness expands to encompass the entire ecosystem. But she also warned that it's the most critical period. The human mind isn't naturally equipped to process this much information. Shadow lifted his head from where he lay at Ethan's feet, sensing his friend's distress. The wolf had grown noticeably in the past days, his form becoming more majestic, his eyes showing an intelligence that even skeptics couldn't deny. Through their bond, Ethan felt Shadow's steady presence like an anchor in a storm of sensations. "The markings at the Henderson farm," Claire said suddenly, pulling up photos on her tablet. "They've changed. Look." The ancient symbols had indeed shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns overnight. Ethan didn't need to study them to know their meaning. The knowledge flowed directly into his mind through his connection with the forest. "They're a warning," he translated, his eyes taking on that otherworldly glow that now appeared whenever he accessed deeper levels of his abilities. "The balance is shifting too quickly. The old barriers between natural and human worlds are breaking down faster than they should." As if to confirm his words, a flock of ravens descended into the yard, their patterns forming symbols in the air before settling on the branches above. Through their eyes, Ethan saw flashes of disturbing images, construction crews moving into protected areas, polluted water seeping into sacred springs, and something else, something ancient, stirring beneath the mountains. The teacup slipped from his hand as the vision overwhelmed him. This time, Claire and his mother couldn't catch him before he fell. Shadow leaped up, pressing his body against Ethan's as waves of energy pulsed between them. "Ethan!" Claire's voice seemed to come from far away. "Dr. Thompson, we need Dr. Thompson." But even as his consciousness struggled with the flood of information, Ethan felt something else. Other presences, similar to his own, scattered across distant mountains and forests. Other guardians, their powers awakening in response to the same threat he sensed. Through their shared awareness, images flowed. A girl in the Pacific Northwest commanding ancient redwoods to protect salmon streams, a young man in the Rockies running with wolf packs to guard migration routes, an elderly woman in the Appalachians speaking with thunderstorms to protect endangered species. Dr. Thompson arrived to find Ethan in a state between consciousness and trance, his body glowing with the same ethereal light that had appeared at the town hall. The old doctor's face showed both awe and concern as he checked Ethan's vital signs. "The transformation is accelerating," he announced, his voice grave. "The forest is pushing him to complete the change faster than normal. Something must be forcing its hand." Megan clutched her son's hand, feeling pulses of energy flow through his skin. "What can we do?" "The town needs to understand," Claire said firmly. "Really understand. Not just accept the existence of guardians, but actively help protect the balance. Otherwise, Ethan's fighting this battle alone." Shadow howled, a sound that carried for miles and was answered by every dog in Evergreen. Through their bond, Ethan felt the wolf's message clear as day. He wasn't alone. He would never be alone again. But as his awareness continued to expand, touching the deepest roots of the mountains and the highest clouds above, Ethan realized that being the guardian meant more than just protecting nature from human excess. It meant preparing for a confrontation with forces that had remained dormant for centuries, waiting for the moment when the balance would be vulnerable enough to strike. The time of hiding was over. The time of action had begun. And somewhere in the depths of his transforming consciousness, Ethan knew that the real test of his role as guardian was still to come. The Evergreen High School gymnasium had been transformed into an emergency response center with maps and monitors covering every wall. Mayor Harrison, who had initially opposed Ethan's revelation, now stood before a crowd of concerned citizens, pointing to satellite images of the surrounding region. "The environmental changes, Dr. Carter predicted are accelerating," he announced, gesturing to where Megan stood with her research team. "We're seeing unprecedented shifts in groundwater patterns, soil composition, and wildlife behavior across the entire mountain range. Ethan sat in the back, Shadow at his side, trying to focus through the constant stream of sensory input that now filled his mind. Claire held his hand, her presence helping him stay grounded in his human consciousness. Over the past week, he'd learned to filter some of the forest's messages, but it was still overwhelming. "Tell them what you saw," Claire whispered, squeezing his hand encouragingly. Standing slowly, Ethan made his way to the front. The crowd parted before him, still in awe of the subtle glow that seemed to emanate from his skin. As he reached the podium, he felt Shadow's consciousness merge with his own, helping him channel his growing powers. With a gesture, he transformed the gymnasium's air into a three-dimensional map of the mountain range, far more detailed than any satellite image. Gasps filled the room as people saw their region through the forest's awareness for the first time. "There's something awakening beneath the mountains," Ethan explained, his voice carrying echoes of ancient wisdom. "The earth itself is responding to decades of environmental damage. The old powers, the ones my grandmother's journals warned about, they're stirring." The image shifted, showing dark energy pulsing through underground channels, following the paths of polluted groundwater and damaged ley lines. The forest chose guardians to maintain balance, but we're not just fighting against human carelessness anymore. We're fighting against the Earth's own immune system. Dr. Thompson stepped forward, holding his book of records. "According to ancient accounts, when the balance between human and natural worlds becomes too damaged, the Earth awakens entities of pure natural force, spirits of earthquake, flood, and storm. They don't distinguish between those who caused the damage and those who tried to prevent it." "But why now?" Sarah Chen called out from where she was live-streaming the meeting for those who couldn't attend. "Why are guardians awakening all over the country at the same time?" Ethan felt a pulse of understanding through his connection with the forest. "Because it's not just happening here. The Earth is reaching a tipping point globally. The other guardians and we can feel it. We're the last line of defense before nature takes matters into its own hands." As if responding to his words, the ground trembled slightly. Through his expanded awareness, Ethan felt the stirring of something ancient and powerful deep beneath the mountain. Shadow growled, sensing it too. "What can we do?" Mayor Harrison asked, fear and determination mingling in his voice. "How does a small town fight forces of nature?" "By changing how we live with nature," Megan interjected, stepping up beside her son. "The research team has been analyzing the data from Ethan's visions. Every environmental threat he's shown us can be addressed, but it will take the entire community working together." Claire joined them, pulling up her research on the ancient symbols. "The markings aren't just warnings, they're instructions. The original inhabitants of this land knew how to live in harmony with these forces. Their knowledge was preserved in these patterns, waiting for the next guardian to arise." The image above them shifted again, showing a network of connections between human settlements and natural systems. Through these visions, the town began to see a new way forward. Green architecture integrating with forest ecosystems, water management systems that followed natural flow patterns, and energy solutions that worked with the Earth's natural forces rather than against them. But even as hope began to grow in the room, Ethan felt another tremor, stronger this time. Through his connection with other guardians, he sensed similar disturbances across the country. The ancient forces were growing restless, testing the barriers that had contained them for centuries. Shadow pressed against his leg, sharing a vision of gathering storm clouds and shifting earth. The wolf's message was clear. They were running out of time. The transformation of one small town wouldn't be enough to prevent what was coming. They needed to spread the message, to awaken humanity's ancient understanding of its place in nature's balance. As the meeting continued, with townspeople offering ideas and resources for the changes ahead, Ethan felt another presence touch his consciousness, different from the other guardians, older and more powerful. Through this connection came a message that made his heart race. The gathering of guardians was no accident. Something larger was at work, preparing for a confrontation that would determine the future of human-nature relations across the globe. The time of small changes was over. Evergreen needed to become more than just a model of environmental harmony. It needed to become a beacon for others, a proof that humans could restore their ancient bond with nature before it was too late. And through it all, The presence beneath the mountain continued to stir, waiting to see if humanity would choose wisdom or face the consequences of its long neglect of the natural balance. 2 weeks after the gymnasium meeting, Evergreen had become unrecognizable. The once ordinary small town now pulsed with an energy that attracted visitors from across the country. Green vines crawled up building walls, not through neglect but by design, integrating human architecture with natural growth patterns that Ethan had shown them through his visions. The Henderson farm, once the epicenter of controversy, had been transformed into a revolutionary permaculture center. Richard Henderson himself, initially the strongest opponent of change, now led tours explaining how working with nature had doubled his crop yields while using half the water. "It's like the land itself knows what we need," he explained to a group of visiting agricultural experts. "Ever since we started following the Guardian's guidance, everything grows better, stronger, more resilient." Ethan watched from a distance, leaning against an ancient oak tree with Shadow beside him. His appearance had changed subtly but noticeably. His eyes now held permanent flecks of gold, similar to Shadow's, and his movements had taken on a fluid grace that seemed more suited to the forest than the town. "You're getting stronger," Claire observed, approaching with her tablet displaying messages from other communities seeking guidance. "But something's still bothering you." Ethan nodded, his enhanced senses extending deep into the earth. "The changes here are good, but they're not spreading fast enough. The force beneath the mountains, it's growing impatient." As if to emphasize his point, a deep rumble shook the ground. In the distance, birds took flight in synchronized patterns that spelled out ancient warnings in the sky. Through his connection with other Guardians, Ethan felt similar disturbances occurring across the country. Dr. Thompson's car pulled up the dirt road, kicking up dust that danced strangely in the afternoon light. The old doctor had been documenting Ethan's transformation meticulously, combining modern medical knowledge with the ancient wisdom in his books. "Your latest test results are fascinating," he said, joining them under the oak. "Your DNA structure is actually changing, adapting to handle the increased energy flow from your connection with nature. It's like your body is evolving in real time." "Is that why the headaches have stopped?" Claire asked, concerned. The debilitating episodes that had once plagued Ethan had given way to moments of extraordinary clarity. "His human consciousness is no longer fighting the transformation," Dr. Thompson explained. "But these changes, they're happening faster than any records indicate they should. The Earth is accelerating the process." Shadow suddenly stood alert, his fur bristling. Through their bond, Ethan received a flood of images, other wolves across the continent reporting similar disturbances beneath their territories. The network of Guardians lit up in his mind like a constellation of living stars, each one sensing the growing urgency. Megan arrived with a team of environmental scientists, their equipment registering unprecedented readings from the soil and air. "The mineral composition of the entire region is changing," she reported, showing them data streams that pulsed with the same rhythm as Ethan's enhanced heartbeat. "It's as if the land itself is going through a metamorphosis." "Not just the land," Ethan said softly, raising his hand. The air around his fingers rippled with visible energy, and nearby plants responded, growing and blooming in accelerated patterns. "Everything is changing. The barrier between the natural and supernatural is getting thinner." Claire's tablet suddenly lit up with messages from across the globe. News organizations were reporting mysterious environmental phenomena worldwide, ancient forests regenerating overnight, polluted waters spontaneously purifying themselves, endangered species reappearing in numbers that defied explanation. "It's not just us," she realized, scrolling through the reports. Evergreen's transformation is catalyzing changes everywhere. People are starting to remember their connection to nature. But even as hope spread, Ethan felt the presence beneath the mountain pulse with ancient power. Shadow pressed against him, sharing a vision of what was to come. A test that would challenge not just his abilities as a guardian, but humanity's readiness to embrace a new way of living with the natural world. The transformation of Evergreen was just the beginning. The real challenge would be helping the rest of the world understand and accept these changes before the ancient forces decided that humanity had run out of time. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting the transformed town in ethereal light, Ethan felt his consciousness expand further than ever before. In that moment of clarity, he saw the true scope of what being a guardian meant. Not just protecting nature from humanity, but helping humanity remember its place within nature. The metamorphosis was spreading, crossing boundaries of geography and belief, awakening old memories in the collective consciousness of the human race. But with each passing day, the rumbling beneath the mountains grew stronger, marking the countdown to a confrontation that would determine the future of both worlds. The morning sun cast long shadows through Evergreen's transformed streets as Ethan sat in the newly established Guardians' Council chamber, once the town hall's dusty storage room, now a harmonious blend of modern technology and natural elements. Living vines intertwined with computer screens, while crystalline formations served as natural amplifiers for the Earth's energy. Claire managed the global communication hub they'd created, coordinating with emerging Guardian sites worldwide. "Another awakening in the Amazon," she reported, marking a glowing point on their living map. "A 12-year-old girl who can communicate with the rainforest. She's already helping indigenous tribes protect their lands from illegal logging." Shadow, now nearly full-grown and radiating an otherworldly presence, lifted his head from where he lay near the crystal formations. Through their bond, Ethan felt the wolf's satisfaction. Each new Guardian strengthened the growing network of Earth's defenders. "That makes 17 confirmed Guardians this month alone," Megan noted, updating her research database. "The Earth is choosing them strategically, placing them in the most critically threatened ecosystems." Dr. Thompson entered, carrying another stack of his ancient texts. "I've been cross-referencing historical records. This gathering of Guardians, it's unprecedented. Never in recorded history have so many emerged at once." Before Ethan could respond, his consciousness expanded suddenly, connecting him to the global network of Guardians. Images flooded his mind. The young Guardian in the Amazon directing rivers of energy through ancient tribal pathways, the Guardian in the Rockies communicating with glaciers to slow their melting, an elderly woman in Japan helping her city integrate modern technology with natural energy flows. But with this vision came a wave of urgency that made the crystals in the room vibrate. Shadow growled softly, sensing it too. "Something's changed," Ethan said, his voice carrying echoes of other Guardians speaking through him. "The presence beneath the mountains, it's not just here anymore. There are others like it awakening around the world." The living map pulsed with new energy signatures, showing deep disturbances in the Earth's crust at multiple locations. Each site corresponded to an ancient sacred place, points where the barrier between natural and supernatural forces had always been thinnest. Sarah Chen, who had become their media coordinator, rushed in with her tablet. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up news feeds from around the world. "It's happening everywhere. Spontaneous environmental restoration, animals behaving in impossible ways, plants growing through concrete in perfect geometric patterns." The feeds showed scenes that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Whales guiding ships away from emerging coral reefs, wolves leading hikers around dangerous mining sites, birds forming living bridges to help animals cross busy highways. The Earth isn't just defending itself anymore, Claire realized, watching the footage. It's showing humans a new way to live. Every Guardian site is becoming a model of harmony between technology and nature. Ethan stood, moving to the center of the room where a beam of sunlight intersected with the crystal formations. As he entered the light, his transformation became more visible. His skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and his eyes reflected the ancient wisdom of the forest. "But it's not spreading fast enough," he said, voicing the concern that echoed through the Guardian network. "The ancient forces, they're losing patience. They see how much damage has already been done, how close we are to a point of no return." Through their shared consciousness, the Guardians felt it. A shifting in the deep places of the Earth, a stirring of powers that had slept since the dawn of civilization. The force beneath Evergreen's mountain was just one small part of a global awakening. Megan's research equipment began registering massive energy fluctuations. "The mineral changes we saw here in Evergreen, they're happening everywhere now. The Earth's fundamental composition is shifting, preparing for something." Before she could finish, every crystal in the room blazed with light. and Ethan received the most powerful vision yet. He saw the ancient forces rising, taking forms that bridged the gap between natural and supernatural, elementals of earth, water, air, and fire, preparing to reclaim the world from human influence. But he also saw something else, a way forward, a path that would require every guardian working in perfect harmony. The transformation of Evergreen wasn't just a model for sustainable living, it was a blueprint for awakening humanity's dormant connection to the natural world. "We need to share everything," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of collective guardian wisdom. "Not just our successes, but our process, our struggles, our understanding. Every community needs to see that this change is possible." Shadow stood, his form seeming to grow larger as he channeled the forest's power. Around the world, other guardian animals did the same, ancient spirits taking physical form to help guide humanity back to balance. The crystals pulsed with a new rhythm, and the living map showed lines of energy connecting guardian sites, forming a web of consciousness that could potentially encompass the entire planet. But as hope spread through the network, so did awareness of the approaching confrontation. The ancient forces were rising, testing humanity's readiness to embrace a new way of being. And through the Guardian network, a message echoed clear and urgent. The time of gradual change was over. The next phase would determine whether humans would be partners in the Earth's evolution or victims of its defense mechanisms. The sky above Evergreen darkened with clouds that moved against the wind, forming patterns that hadn't been seen since ancient times. Through the Guardian network, Ethan sensed similar phenomena occurring at sacred sites worldwide. Nature itself was writing warnings in the heavens. In the Guardian's Council Chamber, now the heart of a global environmental renaissance, leaders from around the world gathered both in person and through holographic projections created by the crystal array. The technology, powered by natural energy and enhanced by Guardian abilities, allowed them to bridge distances in ways that seemed to defy physics. "The changes are accelerating beyond our models," said Dr. Amara Okafor, a climate scientist from Nigeria, her holographic form shimmering with urgency. "What Evergreen accomplished in months is now happening in weeks, sometimes days, at new Guardian sites." Claire managed the incoming data streams, her screens showing time-lapse images of deserts blooming, polluted cities transforming into green havens, and ocean waters clearing of plastic waste. But beneath these positive changes, sensors detected the growing tremors of ancient forces stirring. "The Earth's recovery is remarkable," Megan observed, "but the pressure building beneath the surface." She didn't need to finish her thought. Everyone could feel it, a tension in the air that made hair stand on end and caused animals to grow restless. Shadow, now an impressive figure that commanded attention even among world leaders, stood at attention beside Ethan. Through their bond, they shared awareness of what approached, not just physical changes, but a fundamental shift in the fabric of reality itself. "The barriers are thinning faster than ever," Ethan announced, his voice carrying echoes of ancient wisdom. The other Guardians, connected through their shared consciousness, felt the truth of his words. The forces beneath the mountains, beneath the oceans, they're not just stirring anymore. They're awakening. As if in response, the ground trembled. Around the world, Guardian sites reported similar phenomena. The Earth's deep places were opening, preparing to release entities that had been sealed away since the last age of magic. Dr. Thompson spread his ancient texts across the central table, their pages glowing with previously invisible script. "The records speak of a time of choosing," he translated, his fingers tracing illuminated symbols, "when the Guardians would either guide humanity to transcend its destructive patterns or stand aside as nature reclaimed its dominion." Young Lisa Martinez, the newly awakened Guardian from the Amazon, spoke through her hologram. "The rainforest shows me visions," she said, her eyes glowing with the same inner light as Ethan's. "Ancient spirits taking physical form, rising from the Earth's core. They judge us not by our words, but by the changes we've embraced." The crystal array pulsed with increasing energy as more Guardians joined the conversation, each sharing visions of what was coming. The network they'd built wasn't just for communication, it was a defense system, preparing for the moment when the ancient forces would rise to test humanity's worthiness. Suddenly, Every guardian animal across the globe reacted simultaneously. Shadow's howl merged with the cries of wolves, eagles, whales, and countless other creatures chosen to bridge the gap between human and natural worlds. Through their unified voice came a clear warning. The testing had begun. The ground split open at sacred sites worldwide, releasing glowing mists that took forms from humanity's oldest memories. Elementals of earth and water, spirits of storm and flame, embodiments of nature's raw power. These beings had slept since the last age of magic, waiting for the moment when they would judge humanity's right to exist in harmony with the natural world. In Evergreen, the mountain that had harbored their local force finally cracked, revealing a chamber that had been sealed for millennia. The air filled with an ancient presence that made even the strongest guardians tremble with awe. Through the Guardian network, Ethan felt the overwhelming power of these awakened forces. They were neither malevolent nor benevolent. They were nature itself, raw and uncompromising, demanding proof that humanity could change its destructive ways. This is what we've been preparing for, Claire realized, watching as the transformations they'd achieved in Evergreen rippled out through the network, strengthening similar changes worldwide. Every community we've helped, every person we've taught to reconnect with nature, they're all part of our answer to these forces. Shadow pressed against Ethan's side, sharing a vision of what was at stake. The wolf's wisdom, accumulated through countless generations of guardian bonds, showed both the danger and the opportunity this moment presented. The ancient forces were rising not just to judge, but to transform. The question was whether humanity would be part of that transformation or its victim. Everything the Guardians had built, their network, their understanding, their renewed connection to nature, was about to face its ultimate test. As storm clouds gathered and the earth continued to tremor, the Guardians prepared for a confrontation that would determine not just the future of human civilization, but the very relationship between mankind and nature. The time of preparation was over. The moment of truth had arrived. The ancient chamber beneath Evergreen's mountain glowed with otherworldly light, as Ethan, Shadow by his side, led the assembled Guardians down steps that hadn't felt human footsteps in millennia. The crystalline walls pulsed with living energy, reflecting the combined power of the global Guardian network. Claire followed close behind, her tablet's sensors struggling to process the unprecedented readings. "The energy signatures are off the charts," she whispered, though in this sacred space even whispers carried the weight of prophecy. It's like the chamber is amplifying the Earth's own heartbeat. Through the Guardian network, they felt similar scenes unfolding at sacred sites worldwide. In the Amazon, Lisa Martinez descended into hidden temples of living vines. In the Himalayas, an elderly monk entered ice caves that held the memories of ages. Beneath the Pacific, marine guardians swam into the depths where ancient spirits had slumbered since the dawn of time. The central chamber opened before them, vast and alive with swirling patterns of light. At its heart, a column of pure energy rose from the depths of the earth, taking forms from humanity's oldest memories, faces of storms and mountains, bodies of rivers and flames. "We are the first ones," the energy spoke, its voice resonating through every guardian's consciousness simultaneously. "We slept while humanity grew, waiting to see if you would learn to live in harmony with the world that birthed you." Shadow's fur bristled as the ancient presence filled the chamber. Through their bond, Ethan felt the wolf's recognition of these beings. They were nature itself, conscious and judging. "We see what you have built," the voice continued, images of Evergreen's transformation rippling through the air. A single seed of harmony in a world of discord. But is it enough? Can this change spread fast enough to heal the wounds your kind has inflicted? The ground trembled as more ancient forces rose worldwide, their combined power threatening to reshape the Earth's surface. Through the Guardian network, Ethan felt the panic spreading as humans everywhere witnessed nature itself taking conscious form. But in that moment of crisis, something unexpected happened. Shadow stepped forward, his form growing larger, more primal, until he stood as an embodiment of all guardian animals throughout history. Through him, the spirits of countless protectors spoke. "Show them." Shadow's consciousness echoed through the network, not in words, but in pure understanding. Show them what humanity can become. Ethan understood. Raising his hands, he channeled the combined experiences of every transformed community, every person who had relearned their connection to nature. The crystal walls reflected these images worldwide. Evergreen's living buildings, the Amazon's restored rainforest, Japan's harmonious fusion of technology and nature. Other guardians joined in, each adding their own successes to the demonstration. The network lit up like a constellation of hope, showing not just what had been achieved, but what was possible. Your changes are meaningful, the ancient presence acknowledged, but they came only when faced with extinction. How can we trust humanity to maintain this harmony once the crisis passes? Claire stepped forward, her voice steady despite the overwhelming power filling the chamber. Because we're not just changing our actions, she declared. We're remembering who we really are. The Guardians haven't just been teaching us new ways to live, they've been awakening memories buried in our very DNA. The energy swirled, considering. Through the network, Guardians and their communities held their breath, feeling the weight of this moment. The ancient forces had the power to reshape or unmake the world as humans knew it. Suddenly, Shadow's consciousness merged completely with Ethan's, and through them flowed the combined wisdom of every Guardian bond throughout history. In that moment of perfect unity between human and nature, they offered the Ancient Ones a vision of a different future. It wasn't just images of transformed cities or restored ecosystems. It was a fundamental shift in human consciousness, the awakening of an ancient understanding that had been dormant for millennia. Through their connection, they showed how humanity could evolve not by conquering nature, but by remembering its place within it. The energy patterns in the chamber shifted, responding to this demonstration of genuine change. The ancient presence seemed to pulse with something like hope, but also with determination. You offer a promising vision, the voice resonated, but vision alone is not enough. If humanity wishes to enter this new age of harmony, it must prove itself worthy through actions, not just intentions. The chamber filled with blinding light as the ancient forces revealed their true purpose. They hadn't risen simply to judge humanity. They had come to initiate a transformation that would either elevate human consciousness to a new level of existence or reduce civilization to ashes, allowing the Earth to begin anew. Through the Guardian network, Ethan felt the choice being offered, not just to him but to all of humanity. The next moments would determine whether the human race would take its next evolutionary step or be deemed unready for the power and responsibility that came with true harmony with nature. The time of judgment had arrived, and the power to shape humanity's fate rested in the combined efforts of every person who had dared to embrace a new way of living with the natural world. The ancient chamber thrummed with power as the first ones presented their challenge. Through the Guardian network, their message reached every transformed community simultaneously. Humanity would have one day, one single rotation of the Earth, to demonstrate its commitment to living in harmony with nature. Not with words or promises, the ancient presence declared, but with unified action that proves your species has truly evolved. Ethan felt the weight of this moment through his connection with every Guardian worldwide. Shadow pressed against him, their combined consciousness expanding to encompass the global network of transformed communities. "We can do this," Claire said, her voice carrying through the crystal-enhanced communication system to every Guardian site. "Every change we've made, every person we've taught, it's all been preparing us for this moment." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Through the network, they witnessed humanity rising to meet the challenge in ways that transcended their expectations. In New York City, millions of people stepped out of their offices and homes, joining hands to channel energy through ancient ley lines that ran beneath the concrete, awakening dormant seeds that had waited centuries for this moment. Living towers of intertwined plants and trees began to rise, transforming the urban landscape into a vertical forest that cleaned the air and provided sustainable food sources. In the industrial heartlands of China, factory workers led by their local Guardian initiated a mass transformation of manufacturing processes, their ancient cultural wisdom merging with modern technology to create production methods that enhanced rather than damaged the environment. The infamous smog began to clear as facilities transformed into living ecosystems that produced goods in harmony with nature. Across the African savannas, tribal elders who had preserved ancient knowledge joined with modern conservationists, their combined wisdom spreading through the land like a healing wave. Desertification reversed as communities implemented traditional land management techniques enhanced by guardian powers. "Look," Claire whispered, her screens showing similar scenes unfolding worldwide. "It's not just the guardian sites anymore. Every community that learned from our example is teaching others, spreading the change exponentially." Through their bond, Shadow shared a vision of the Earth's energy grid, the network of natural power that connected all living things. Humans weren't just adapting to this network anymore, they were actively participating in it, becoming conscious contributors to the planet's living systems. In the Amazon, Lisa Martinez led her people in ancient ceremonies that had evolved into powerful environmental restoration techniques. The rainforest responded, regenerating decades of damage in hours as humans and nature worked in perfect synchronization. The first ones watched through their manifestations at each sacred site, their ancient consciousness evaluating every action, every choice, every moment of genuine change. The power they wielded could feel the sincerity in these transformations. This wasn't just humanity putting on a show, but a species genuinely remembering its place in the natural order. Dr. Thompson's ancient texts began to glow with new text appearing on their pages, recording this historic moment as it unfolded. The prophecies never spoke of just surviving judgment, he realized, studying the emerging words. They spoke of transcendence, of humanity rising to join the Earth's guardianship, rather than simply being judged by it. Through the Guardian network, Ethan felt a new consciousness emerging. Not just individual humans connecting with nature, but a collective awakening of humanity's potential as stewards, rather than conquerors of the natural world. Shadow's form shifted, growing more magnificent as he channeled this growing power. Through him, all guardian animals worldwide began to glow with internal light, their forms becoming more ethereal as they helped bridge the gap between physical and spiritual realms. The ancient chamber's crystals pulsed faster, reflecting the accelerating transformation. But as hope grew, so did the challenge. The first ones had not made their task simple. True harmony required more than surface changes. "The hour grows late," the ancient presence reminded them. "Show us not just what you can do in a moment of crisis, but how you will maintain this harmony through generations to come." Megan stepped forward, her scientific mind merging with newly awakened spiritual awareness. "We need to show them our legacy plan," she said urgently. "Not just today's changes, but how we'll teach future generations to maintain and enhance this harmony." Through the Guardian network, they began to share not just actions, but teachings, ways of living, thinking, and being that would ensure this transformation lasted. It wasn't just about changing the physical world anymore, it was about evolving human consciousness itself. As the Earth continued its rotation toward the deadline, humanity faced its greatest test, proving that it could sustain this enlightened state not just in a moment of crisis, but as a new way of existing in harmony with the natural world. As the Earth completed its rotation, the first ones gathered their consciousness at every sacred site, preparing to render their judgment. The crystal chamber beneath Evergreen's mountain glowed with unprecedented power, reflecting the combined energy of humanity's global transformation. Through the Guardian network, Ethan and Shadow witnessed the final moments of the worldwide demonstration. Communities across the planet had not just shown their ability to change, but had created lasting systems to maintain their harmony with nature. "It's time," Claire announced, her monitors showing the sun rising over the international dateline. Every transformed site is ready to present their achievements. The presentation began in the East, where Japanese cities had revolutionized urban living. Buildings now functioned as living organisms, their systems perfectly integrated with natural cycles. Solar panels merged with ancient temple architecture, creating structures that honored both progress and tradition. The wave of demonstrations moved westward with the sun. In India, sacred rivers once choked with pollution now ran clear, their waters purified by a combination of modern technology and ancient spiritual practices. Millions of people gathered along the banks, their combined consciousness helping to maintain the healing energy that had transformed the waterways. "The changes are holding," Megan reported, analyzing data streams from around the world. "These aren't temporary fixes. The transformations have reached a self-sustaining level." Through their deep bond, Shadow shared a vision with Ethan. The Earth's energy grid had transformed, incorporating human consciousness as a natural part of its flow. People weren't just living on the Earth anymore. They had become active participants in its living systems. The first ones observed silently, as each community demonstrated not just their physical changes, but their plans for the future. Schools worldwide had integrated environmental consciousness into their curricula, teaching children to communicate with nature as easily as they learned to read and write. In Africa, where the Guardian Network had helped reverse desertification, communities showed how they had created systems to pass down both traditional wisdom and new harmonious technologies to future generations. The Sahara's edges were blooming, not through forced cultivation, but through restored natural processes. Lisa Martinez, speaking from the heart of the Amazon, demonstrated how indigenous wisdom had been preserved and enhanced, creating a living library of environmental knowledge that could be shared globally while respecting its sacred origins. "This is more than we expected," the ancient presence finally spoke, its voice resonating through every sacred site. "You have not simply changed your actions, you have begun to evolve your very consciousness." The crystal chamber filled with images from around the world, children communicating with plants, elders teaching ancient wisdom enhanced by modern understanding, scientists working in harmony with spiritual leaders to maintain the new balance. Shadow stepped forward, his form now radiating pure light. Through him, all guardian animals spoke as one, testifying to humanity's transformation. They showed how the bond between humans and nature had been restored, not just through the guardians, but through millions of individual awakenings to a deeper truth. "We see now," the first ones declared, "that our test has served its true purpose. We did not rise to judge humanity's worthiness to continue existing upon this earth. We rose to catalyze your species' next evolutionary step." The chamber's energy shifted, and through the Guardian Network, everyone felt the ancient power's decision. The crystals began to pulse with a new rhythm, matching the harmonious beat of human hearts, aligned with the Earth's natural cycles. "You have proven not just your ability to change," the presence continued, "but your readiness to join the greater community of conscious beings that maintain the universe's balance. The age of separation is ending. The age of harmony has begun." Energy surged through the Guardian Network, not as a test now, but as a gift. The first ones were sharing their ancient knowledge, teaching humanity how to maintain and enhance the harmony they had achieved. But this gift came with eternal responsibility. "The role of Guardian now extends beyond individuals," they explained. "Every human carries the potential to communicate with nature, to contribute to the Earth's well-being. You have earned your place as conscious stewards of this world." As the ancient presence spoke, something extraordinary happened. The boundary between human consciousness and natural awareness began to dissolve. People everywhere found themselves able to sense the living energy around them, to understand their role in the greater web of life. This wasn't just an ending to their test, it was the beginning of a new chapter in human evolution. Through the Guardian Network, Ethan and Shadow felt the joy and wonder of millions as they discovered their renewed connection to the natural world. The first ones had not just judged humanity worthy, they had welcomed them into an ancient fellowship of conscious beings dedicated to maintaining universal harmony. The transformation that had begun in one small town had catalyzed the next step in human consciousness. 1 year after the first one's judgment, Evergreen had become a beacon of hope for the world. The small mountain town that had started the global transformation now hosted visitors from every corner of the earth, all seeking to learn from the place where humanity's evolution to harmony had begun. Ethan stood at the edge of his familiar forest, though both he and the wilderness had changed profoundly. His appearance now reflected his role as bridge between worlds. His eyes permanently held the golden light of natural wisdom, and his movements flowed with the grace of one who existed in perfect harmony with his environment. Shadow, now a magnificent creature that seemed to shimmer between wolf and spirit, stood beside him. Their bond had become a model for the new relationship between humans and nature, not one of dominance or submission, but of mutual respect, and understanding. The first group of students arrives today, Claire reminded him, approaching with her tablet, though she rarely needed it anymore. Like many humans, she had developed the ability to communicate directly with the natural world. They're coming from every continent to learn how to establish Guardian sites in their own regions. Through the enhanced Guardian network, they could feel similar scenes playing out worldwide. The Amazon had become a living university where Lisa Martinez taught ancient wisdom merged with new understanding. The Himalayas hosted seekers learning to communicate with the very elements themselves. Every transformed site had become a center of learning and growth. "It's amazing how far we've come," Megan said, joining them at the forest's edge. The former environmental scientist now led a global initiative to document and share the new ways humans could participate in Earth's natural systems. "And to think it all started with you finding a wolf pup in a trap." Dr. Thompson's ancient books had been copied and distributed worldwide, their pages now filled with new chapters documenting humanity's transformation. "The old prophecies spoke of this time," he said, his voice carrying the weight of witness to history. "Not as an ending, but as a beginning, the dawn of true partnership between humanity and nature." The ground hummed with gentle energy as the first ones maintained their presence in the sacred sites, no longer as judges but as teachers, helping humanity grow into its new role. Through their guidance, people were learning to access abilities that had been dormant for millennia. Children born after the transformation showed natural gifts that amazed even the Guardians. They could see energy fields, communicate with plants and animals, and understand the complex web of life that connected all things. Schools had evolved to nurture these abilities alongside traditional learning. Through their deep bond, Shadow shared with Ethan a vision of the future, generations of humans and animals working together as conscious partners in Earth's evolution. The Guardian Network had become a living framework for this collaboration, connecting all life in a dance of mutual support and growth. "Remember when we thought we were just trying to save the forest?" Claire asked, smiling at the memory. "We had no idea we were helping to birth a new age of human consciousness." The crystal chamber beneath the mountain had become a global classroom where the first ones shared ancient wisdom with new guardians. But its most profound lesson was one of hope, proof that humanity could change, could grow, could remember its true place in the natural order. Evergreen itself had evolved beyond anyone's imagination. Living buildings merged seamlessly with the forest, their designs serving both human needs and natural systems. The town's example had inspired similar transformations worldwide, each adapting to local environments while maintaining the core principle of harmony. As the new students began arriving, Ethan felt the familiar surge of joy that came with sharing their story. Each group brought fresh energy and perspectives to the growing global community of environmental stewards. Through the Guardian Network, he could sense similar gatherings at sacred sites around the world. Shadow lifted his head, catching the scent of approaching rain. Through their bond, Ethan felt the wolf's deep satisfaction. They had not just preserved the natural world, they had helped forge a new relationship between humanity and nature that would continue to evolve and grow. "Ready to begin?" Claire asked, as the first group of students approached the forest's edge, their eyes wide with wonder at the tangible energy that filled the air. Ethan nodded, feeling Shadow's encouragement through their bond. Every time they shared their story, it strengthened the foundations of the new world they had helped create. The tale of a boy and a wolf had become a legend of hope, a reminder that the deepest changes often begin with the simplest acts of compassion. As they led the new arrivals into the transformed forest, Ethan felt the presence of all the guardians, past and present, human and animal, physical and spiritual. They had not just changed the world, they had changed what it meant to be human, awakening possibilities that had slumbered since the dawn of time. The story of Evergreen had become more than just a tale of environmental restoration. It had become a beacon of hope, a testament to humanity's potential for positive change, and a promise of an ever-evolving future where humans and nature dance together in perfect harmony. Dear listeners, we hope Ethan and Shadow's journey has touched your hearts and inspired hope for our shared future. This story of transformation and harmony with nature lives on in each of us who chooses to make a difference. For more equally inspiring and transformative stories, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your voice is a vital part of this growing community. Together we can create a future where humanity and nature thrive in perfect harmony. Until the next story.